So welcome to Jewish Mysticism Lessons in Tanya, chapter 28. We are in the practical Tanya on page 318. This is lesson 3 of negative emotions, in which we're talking about all sorts of emotions that creep into our psyche. We've been covering depression and sadness, pain and suffering. Today we'll talk a little bit about inappropriate urges or draws or desires towards things that we shouldn't have, lustful desires, etc. And this is lesson 3 of 5 of this negative emotions course. And you should have in front of you the practical Tanya. We are on page 318, and the handout for chapter 28, when your mind wanders. And for those that are new here, I will. So this is Yara, by the way. This is Yara Davidson. Everybody, for those that. So you're here in the middle of a course. So meaning we've split Tanya up into multiple courses. So Tanya is this book that you have in front of you, and it's the core Hasidic philosophy. It's the core. According to most opinions, it's the basis for all of Hasidic philosophy. It has a lot of Kabbalistic psychology and that kind of thing. And what we've done is, or more like what Rabbi Chaim Miller in the Practical Tanya has done, is we've split, and you can turn to the page in the Practical Tanya. What was that? Yeah, you had a look at this?
Yes.
Perfect. So we've been going through them one at a time, and the way we do it is usually you're welcome to come whenever you want. I'll try to catch you up, but usually we invite people to come at the beginning of any of these courses. In other words, right now we're in negative emotions. In 2 weeks from now, we're going to start positive emotions, etc. So just to catch you up a little bit, in the discussion about negative emotions, we've been talking about depression and sadness. And in the previous 2 chapters, and this will serve as a reminder for everyone, the Alter Rebbe and the Tanya has been discussing 2 different times when you might get depressed, right? Number 1 was from my actions, right? From my actual actions. That was in chapter 26. In chapter 27, we moved on to discussing, okay, so let's say I get beyond this depression and I figure out how do I saddle that depression, because we said sometimes depression can be a catalyst for change, when done correctly. And just to remind you all, that's when it's done and you're in control of it, not it's in control of you. In other words, you designate times to be sad about or to regret prior misdeeds. So that was in chapter 26. In chapter 27, we moved on from actions. We said, okay, let's say I get beyond the actions. Either I'm not doing any negative actions, or I have figured out that whenever I get upset about a negative action, I realize that's a good thing. It just has to be at the right time. So I figure out how to control those emotions, that depression or that sadness or that regret creeps in. Doesn't creep up on me, but I creep up on it. In other words, at these designated times, I say, okay, now let's have a thought, let's have a think. That's a good one, no? That's a good line. Let's have a think about things that I've done wrong in the past, and then in that moment, we'll use that as a catalyst for change, as we brought down the Hasidic saying of Morgen v'Zangor Anders. Tomorrow will be completely different. Now, in chapter 27, we moved on from that. We said, okay, I got that. It's under control. But sometimes I get depressed because no matter how much effort I seem to put in, I seem to still be getting these urges. These thoughts seem to still be creeping into my mind randomly throughout the day. I'm just doing my thing, and then all of a sudden I have this thought to do something completely the opposite of everything that I've been working on myself, etc. And that gets me depressed. And so to that, our approach was in chapter 27, take it easy. That should remind you to be joyous. That should remind you how amazing it is that you're human and you struggle, and how despite the fact, hopefully, that you have these urges, you don't act on them. Great. In chapter 28, the Alter Rebbe introduces probably what, before the Tanya will explain it to us, would be the most depressing of all. Which is, this is not an action, this is not even an urge randomly in the middle of the day, but sometimes we have an urge at the most counterintuitive time. You start prayer, you rock up for minyan, it's 6:30 in the morning, you start davening, it's a particularly inspired day. The weather was perfect, you woke up on time, you were well rested, you went to sleep the night before well, you wake up, you're inspired, maybe you read something the night before, you learned something that morning, whatever it is, you're particularly inspired. You start davening, you're getting into it, and you're feeling, Chassidus works, right? I've learned about developing a love for God, meditating on the words of prayer, and it's working. I'm developing this love for God, and all of a sudden, when you're at the climax of it, you're in the middle of it, boom. Here comes like this, out of left field, you completely weren't thinking about it. First of all, you're in a shul. You're on the other side of the mechitza. And you have no clue why your mind decided, because the mind is an interesting creature, decided to wander to completely the opposite. And you have this completely inappropriate thought, and it's during davening. And or during learning, or during meditation, or whatever it is. It's in the middle of this holy time. You're trying to be such a good person. You know this is a fight. You get it. Struggles come. I'm human. I'm joyous about the struggle because it's an opportunity for me to overcome the struggle. If it doesn't come out into action, that's great. And you've learned to deal with that. And you realize that part of the way to get even past the urges is to work on your character. During davening, during meditation, during thinking about Hashem, during moments when you feel closer, you're doing a mitzvah, whatever it is. And all of a sudden this comes in. That can lead to the lowest level of depression. It's like, do I have absolutely no control of what's going on? It's like hopelessness almost. It's like, I got no idea what I'm doing. Everybody on board with me? Mm-hmm. That's what the Alter Rebbe wants to address in chapter 28.
What kind of thoughts we're talking about?
Let's say something lustful, for instance.
Yeah.
But by the way, it could even be on a micro level. I know it wouldn't lead to as much of a depression, but on a micro level, it could even just be random. Like you all of a sudden start thinking about your business in the middle of your davening, and you're like, I don't understand. I was like in the middle of, you know what I mean? And it doesn't have to be davening, by the way. It could be Torah study. It could be whatever time that you designated in your life that this is a time for me to fuse with the divine. Right? This is my designated time when I'm going to try to connect to Hashem. And all of a sudden, this out of left field comes thinking about my business. Even that could be a little bit, could get to you a little bit. Like, do I have absolutely no control of what's going on over here?
So Yetzer Hara came in. Evil inclination.
Yeah.
Something came in.
Yeah.
So let's say get out of our mind.
One second.
Yeah, I was reading in the morning, then all of a sudden I was thinking about my daughter, this
in the middle,
I couldn't
for some reason, for an hour before, when you were just hanging around watching YouTube videos, you didn't think about all these things. All of a sudden you start studying, right, and it pops in. All of a sudden you start davening. Am I the only one with this experience?
Yeah.
I am? Oh, okay. My point is, why is that sometimes when we're doing something exciting that has nothing to do with God, these thoughts don't come in? Meaning not negative thoughts and not even just neutral thoughts. If your business was so important, why didn't it disrupt you when you were in the middle of watching a movie? It doesn't. All of a sudden, then it doesn't occur to you. But when you're in the middle of davening and you're trying to fuse with Hashem Himself.
Because that's perfect opportunity.
Okay, so Irita's onto something, and that's exactly the idea that we're going to get to.
Maybe because when you're talking to Hashem, the thing that's really important for you, Hashem reflects to you and He wants to participate in your issues. He doesn't want it to be just you. I view Hashem as my partner too.
100%, but why does it have to be something negative that makes me feel like...
I don't feel negative when I start thinking about my business when I'm praying. I'm thinking about Hashem is trying to tell me...
So if that example doesn't work for you, that's fine. But clearly we shouldn't be thinking about,
a cheeseburger.
Well, anything that's not connected to holiness.
How much you hate your neighbor.
Whatever it is that's not connected to holiness, when that enters your mind during prayer, that's very disturbing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. I think if you were thinking about it enough, you would realize that there's certain random thoughts. You're right, business, maybe, okay, you're asking maybe for your business. Maybe that's... But something that's not related to what you're thinking about, and for some reason it pops in then. And it doesn't have to be something negative. It can even be something neutral, but the fact that it's coming during davening and it's disrupting this process by default makes it negative. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So the Alter Rebbe is going to introduce a couple of things. So number one, and this is key to remember because the whole Tanya is based on this, right? For those of you that have been with us since the beginning, remember that in chapter 2, the Alter Rebbe introduced the fact that we have two nefashot, two neshamas, a nefesh halokit, nefesh Muhammad, an animal soul and a godly soul. And this was a novelty of Tanya, if you remember. For the most part, in other works, you'll find them referred to as the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, which means inclinations. In other words, desires. You have good desires and bad desires. And the difference between the Alter Rebbe's approach is that it's almost as if we have two personalities. It's almost as if we're a little bit bipolar. We have inside of us not just two desires that come from the same person, but we have inside of us two different personalities. We have a nefesh halokit and a nefesh Muhammad, a godly soul and an animal soul. And those two personalities, or those two, it's more than a drive, those two souls, let's use the actual word, that's a good word, they're constantly fighting over the same city, which is our consciousness, our life, our body. And that's probably important point number one to bear in mind in such a situation. In order to illustrate this, the Alter Rebbe refers to the physical. In the physical world, when there's a battle, or a wrestling match, or just a fight at the playground, everybody knows that, the nature of it is that when someone is about to be defeated, they get this extra surge of strength. They get this extra, like, I'm about to go down, but I'm going to give it all out. I'm going to get my last shot. Right? We say in English, right? I'm going to get my last shot. In battle, it works this way, right? In wars, throughout the ages, this is always the way it worked. Right? It was always like they're retreating. They're like, well, let's try this way, let's try that way, and all of a sudden they're about to lose the war, and then the soldiers get this last oomph, like this is our last try. Or in a wrestling match, if you've ever watched literally a wrestling match, on television, you'll see that the guy, he's got him down, and then there's that last. Let me try one more time to get you because I know you got me, but like, this is the last try. And sometimes that last try results in him actually winning over, right? The Alter Rebbe says, imagine if the victor, right, the person who's about to win the battle, would let this overwhelm him. Oh my God, what is this extra? I keep vanquishing him. I'm getting closer and closer and closer to knocking him out. I'm getting closer and closer and closer to ending this thing and winning the battle. And because and all of a sudden his strength goes, so it's been going, right, like a stock ticker. It's going down, 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 down. By the way, you see this with companies too, actually, on the stock market, right? They go down, 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 and then right before they go bankrupt, they go up a little bit and they go down. Because, like, I don't know, they tried some new innovative idea, they refinanced or whatever. It's like this last struggle. So imagine if somebody actually lets that overwhelm him and he says, oh my God, I keep getting him. He's weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. I'm feeling less and less and less resistance. I'm about to pin him down. And all of a sudden he's got this extra force. And he says, okay, forget it, I give up. Most silly thing in the world to do. Says the Alter Rebbe, that's what's going on. In our minds, what drives this random thought, whether it's random or whether it's actually negative, that comes into our minds in this moment when we're in the heat of this positivity, the heat of this holiness, we're in this place where we're trying to connect to Hashem. What brings in this thought? Very often it's the Nefesh HaBahamit, because remember that there are two completely different forces. So, who's trying one last time to get a hold here. And all it takes is knocking that one out of the park, and then you won the battle. And now you'll be able to daven like a mensch. So whereas before we understood our psyche the way Tanya explains it, and Tanya understands it, as having two nefashot, it should be very depressing. It really should be. Are you real? Are you real? Are you really involved in this holy endeavor? If you were, this wouldn't come in. You only got one track. And everything is on this. If this negative thought or negative urge is coming into your process when you feel like you're all holy, something's up. Then you're not on the right track. And that should lead to depression. You should become very down if there's only one track. But when we understand that there's two tracks, then that's not a reflection on our service in this moment. You could be actually on the road to actually becoming very, very connected with Hashem. And you could be, as a matter of fact, says the Alter Rebbe, as last time, it should lead to joy. Work, but joy. You have to work on this last moment, overcoming this last moment, but at the same time realize that this is the last oomph. You just got to get over this last hurdle, and then you're home free and smooth sailing, or whatever the word.
Oh, you get this because you're doing well.
Right. Because you're doing well, they're fighting back.
Sure. Has to strengthen.
Okay, but still, where does it come from? So two things. So first of all, what's the advice? How do we actually deal with it? Right? Okay, now we understand where it comes from, and it shouldn't lead to depression. So what should you do in the moment? Says the Alter Rebbe, the worst thing you could do, attempt to wrestle with it. Divert your attention from it completely. Give it no credence whatsoever. Why? Because you know where it's coming from. Because you know that it's only based in
Because you give it
Because
power.
you know it's not real.
If you wrestle, you give it power.
Okay, 1 second. So I'll stop you right there. Because here, I want to open up maybe a parenthetical, but it's very important, I think, to note that the Alter Rebbe here is deviating from the thought of the Baal Shem Tov, which is very uncommon. The Alter Rebbe followed the direct successor line of the Baal Shem Tov, and the Baal Shem Tov was the founder of Chassidus. The Baal Shem Tov used to preach that if you're in the middle of davening and a negative thought comes into your mind, deal with it. Now's the time to deal with it. Davening is a time for wrestling. Wrestle with the thought until you can convert it into another power, another driving force,
into a positive.
Towards your holiness, and then continue to daven. Besides the fact that this takes time, the Alter Rebbe says that is true, but that is the avodah of tzaddikim. That is the service of a tzaddik. A tzaddik on that level can actually deal with that in that moment. But if you're not a tzaddik, and if you're a tzaddik, where is this urge even coming from? Right? I forgot. We have to address that because we all know that a tzaddik doesn't even have an urge to do anything bad. So Alter Rebbe says, by a tzaddik, this comes from, and this becomes a shocker to some, the concept that all Jews are interconnected and all souls are interconnected. What does that mean? This is actually usually referenced as a good thing, right? Whenever we talk about Avat Yisrael, loving another Jew, we say Kol Yisrael, Arevim Zelazeh, all Jews are guarantors one for the other. We all have to be on each other's side. And it's usually a positive thing, You're not in this battle alone. All Jews are with us. We're there. We're going to get through this, right? But unfortunately, and it has to be addressed, sometimes it's the opposite. Our souls are connected. They're all fused from the same one soul, right? The master soul, which is atoms and whatever. Now is not the time for that. It's a whole Kabbalistic conversation in and of itself. But the Alter Rebbe reminds us that for a tzaddik, who's on the highest level, sometimes from a different soul can creep in this negative thing. And therefore, the correct approach for a tzaddik, it's not a bad thing, by the way. He creeps in, he knows it's there, he knows where it's from. If he knows how to handle it, he can actually take that and convert it to the good and help his fellow Jew. So it works both ways, right?
It's a collective consciousness.
Okay. But much more importantly, the Alter Rebbe says for us, regular people, Beinonis, right? Mm-hmm. Or attempting to be Beinonis, Halavai Beinonis. Right? Remember? We just mentioned this 2 weeks ago. Halavai Beinoni. If only we would be a Beinoni. So the Alter Rebbe says the correct approach is to push it out of our minds completely. Unless you know for a fact that you can wrestle with it during your davening, which is a very, very low chance that that's the case, push it out of your mind. This doesn't mean you shouldn't deal with it. You should deal with it. It should happen less often. But as a Beinoni, we have to recognize that this is part of the struggle, and Hashem wants the struggle. And we have to recognize that the reason why this struggle is coming at the height of our holiness is because they're just attempting that last oomph. And if we just completely don't give a credence, I see what you're doing, got you, and move forward, not only do we weaken it, but it completely disappears. It's like a mirage, you pop the bubble. And then we can move on to whatever holy endeavor it was that we were involved in. Why, says the Alter Rebbe, why is it so hard for the Beinoni? And because this is a novel concept of the Alter Rebbe, he needs to make sure to back it up. The Alter Rebbe says when you're tied below, you cannot uplift the bonds. You have to first break free of the bonds and be higher than the bonds and then be able to uplift them. Or in the words of Tehillim, King David says, I forget the Hebrew words, do not answer a fool by his folly, lest you too become like him. And the Alter Rebbe, I think, uses the best words of all.
What page is that?
If you wrestle with a filthy person, you become filthy too. What page is that? So we're towards the end of the chapter. We're jumping around. We're not going completely in order. We are on page 323, the first line in English. For in wrestling with a filthy person, you become filthy too. Right? The example that Alter Rebbe gives is that when you're standing, I don't know. Okay, let's say the same thing. You're in the middle of davening. You're trying to daven like a mensch, right? And then there's this new interruption. But instead of the interruption being internal, imagine for a moment that the interruption was external, Right? So you're standing there, and all of a sudden, some nasty heathen is the words that the Alter Rebbe uses. Right? A guy who's really got it out. All he wants is that you should fall. Oh, you think you're so holy, and he starts drilling you. He starts bringing in nasty thoughts, and he's taking your mind in all sorts of directions. It's hard to ignore somebody who's standing right in front of you. Right? Says the Alter Rebbe, do you think it would be of any use right now to have a conversation with him? Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that for a moment. No, that's not true. That's exactly what he wants. He wants to draw you into the conversation. Right? I'll get you in, and then I'll figure out how to maneuver this conversation to be exactly what I want. Before you know it, your davening is lost. Mm-hmm. Right? Says the Alter Rebbe, the person standing in front of you, inside you could also be the exact same thing. Remember that it's two separate nefashot, it's two separate souls. It's the animal soul and the godly soul. The animal soul essentially is standing in front of the godly soul and doing just that. Mm-hmm. Ignore it. Push it out of your mind. Because now it's not the time to deal with it. Now, if it was an action, now is the time to deal with it. Always. Right? If it inspires you to do something negative, to do an actual negative action in the middle of davening, or in the middle of anything really, in any part of life, actions are a whole different story. Remember, what we're talking about here is because we're talking about the Beinoni, and it's natural for him to have urges and desires to do something wrong, the whole fight is to remove it from action, not allow it to creep into action. That's the same thing with the davening. This is our way of dealing with it, that it doesn't affect the davening. So the fact that it's an urge, that's fine. It's natural. It's part of the struggle. The fact that it affects my davening, that's where I fail. Don't let it do that. And the Alter Rebbe ends off with one point which I think Yosef Ilan was hinting to before class when we started, like sort of the teaser conversation about this. Let's read it inside. Mm-hmm. Section 3. Yeah. When all else fails. Yosef Ilan, you want to read for us? So just read the whole bottom, from the whole section 3, which is basically till the bottom of the page, but only read the English.
From the beginning there? Or?
From section 3, yeah. Page 323, section 3. See it? Of course. From there till the bottom of the page, okay. And skip all the Hebrew. Yeah, go ahead.
Of course, that is the easier said than done. What do you do if inappropriate thoughts keep coming back again and again? But if you find it hard to wipe out inappropriate thoughts from your mind because they intrude in your mind with great force, then humble yourself before God and implore Him in your mind.
Says the Alter Rebbe, when all else fails, get down on your hands and knees and beg.
Right.
If it's so powerful, if in the middle of your davening you find yourself with an emotion and urge to do the most terrible thing in the world, whatever, right? And it's coming at the most holy time, and you know it's coming from Nefesh HaMahamit, but for some reason you cannot ignore it. You can't get it out of your mind, says the Alter Rebbe, beg. Remember that Hashem loves us, and like Marguerite mentioned at the beginning of class, Hashem is our partner, and He can help us. If you feel it's beyond your capability even just to ignore it, which this is not always the case, but in unique instances with very forceful, interruptive thoughts into our mind, that's the case, says the Alter Rebbe, pray, beg.
Which is very similar to
what you were mentioning at the beginning of class. That's why I'm having you read.
Implore Him to have pity on you.
One second. There's no need to interrupt your words of prayer. Just implore God in your mind.
Just implore God in your mind. Implore Him to have pity on you, great pity, like the pity of a father on his children, who are derived from his brain, manifest in his seed. Implore God to have the same pity on your divine soul, which is derived from Him, to save your soul from the raging waters of, and that's Psalm 124, of your turbulent mind, which is constantly disturbed by the animal soul. Implore Him to do it not because of your merit, but for His own sake, for His people, literally part of God.
That's it. So the Alter Rebbe ends off by saying, first of all, yes, if you really feel like you can't handle it, there's always that back trapdoor. Ask Hashem for mercy. Now this can't come before you attempted to do it yourself, and you can't fool yourself or God or whatever, right? And say, oh, I know it's an easy one, I could really ignore it, but forget it. I'm just going to ask God to get it out of my mind. It doesn't work that way. But when it's so great, you really can't get it out of your mind, you have to sincerely ask from Hashem to get rid of it. It says the Alter Rebbe, the reason it works is why he quotes from Deuteronomy, Lemano, for His sake. Because who is the animal soul fighting against? The godly soul. which again, the Alter Rebbe introduced in which chapter? All the way in chapter 2, right? Is a piece of God himself, is a portion of God himself. So he should do it for himself, not even for me. Not for me, not for you, not for the person who's davening, but for Hashem himself. Because you don't want your godly soul to lose the battle. In this moment, I need your help. After that, when I'm back in the groove, it's up to me, and I'll work, and I'll put in the effort, etc. But in this moment, I need your help. Because this challenge is beyond me.
But you have to also have confidence that he's going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't need your trust, but yeah, okay, sure. It's true, I mean, he does need your trust, you're right. But I'm saying, I'm not sure if that's the most key component, as much as the key component is not fooling yourself.
Right.
To say this is not something I can handle when really we could handle it, because that's what we just call laziness, right?
Yeah.
And in that moment, right, personal responsibility. And in that moment, we are assured that Hashem will come down and He will help us out of it, and we'll be able to continue on with whatever holy endeavor was we were involved in. And with this, we conclude chapter 28 of Jewish mysticism, lessons in Tanya, when your mind wanders.